I'm Tracy Sable with EWTN News Nightly. Follow us on Facebook and X, and be sure to join us this evening on EWTN.
The Holy Father's prayer intention for the month of October is a shared mission. We pray that the Church continue to sustain a synodal lifestyle in every way as a sign of co-responsibility, promoting the participation, communion, and mission shared by priests, religious, and laity.
EWTN. Live truth. Live Catholic.
Welcome to EWTN News presents the Synod on Synodality in Rome. I'm Catherine Hadro. The final week of the Synod on Synodality continues on here at the Vatican. Today and tomorrow, Synod delegates are devoted to small group discussions and speeches in the full assembly about the Synod's final document, as well as requests for changes. The Synod, an advisory body of the Church, will vote and then deliver this final document to the Pope at the end of the week. Pope Francis can either adopt and publish it as an official papal text or simply use it as a guide to write his own document. Here joining me now throughout this week are my two co-hosts. Dr. Matthew Bunson is Vice President and Editorial Director of EWTN News, and Father Thomas Petri is President of the Dominican House of Studies in Washington, D.C. Well, the final stretches on here now at the Synod. And there was some news Monday from Cardinal Fernandez. He really reiterated Pope Francis's position against women's access to the diaconate. Tell us about this speech that happened and what we know.
Well, that's right. You're talking about Cardinal Victor Manuel Fernandez, who's the prefect for the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith, who was scheduled to have a session, a meeting with Synod delegates who are especially interested in Working Group 5 of the study groups. That is a group that is charged with looking at the question of ministry in the Church, with a particular focus, or one of the aspects of it, is on the role of women in the life of the Church. And as one can imagine, there was a lot of expectation that there was going to be discussion about women deacons, or the question of women deacons in the Church, and he was a no-show. And he subsequently sent a statement saying that he was objectively unable to attend. And then he gave a presentation yesterday, an intervention yesterday, and he had quite a bit to say about the question of women deacons, and that's something that simply is an issue that will not go away.
Father, anything that stood out to you?
Well, you know, and then at the press briefing yesterday, Father Timothy Radcliffe was asked this question, you know, by by a Dutch journalist, right, on how can he explain this to his daughters. And Fernandez had also gotten into this a little bit during his intervention, but I think Father Radcliffe's put it very beautifully, that we cannot clericalize women. And he noted that it's a problem with the way you're thinking about the priesthood, as though the priesthood is the highest position of the Church, and it's not. He mentioned the doctors of the Church, the teachers of the Church, you know, St. Teresa of Avila, St. Catherine of Siena. You know, it reminds me of what I think even Pope Paul VI said when this question first came up, Pope St. Paul VI, that in fact the highest in the Church are not the clerics, but the saints.
Yeah. Well, and Cardinal Fernandez was making a couple of points in his intervention. The first was that, as he said at the very start of the Synod, the question of women deacons, in other words, women being ordained to the diaconate as part of holy orders, is essentially off the table. He stresses that for now it's something that is being studied, that the time is not ripe. There are various phrases that he's used.
Right.
He reiterated that here, then stressed that nevertheless there is a real need, and this has been mandated by Pope Francis, for a continuing study of the life and role of women in the Church, which he considers to be very important. So he's in many ways turning away from, or trying to turn away those who keep pushing this issue of the diaconate for women rather than the broader and important discussion of women in the life of the Church. Then he referred them to the commission that was established in 2020 under Cardinal Giuseppe Petrocchi by Pope Francis to look at that very question. So he's basically saying, if you have further questions, go to them.
So even though it's officially off the table for this synod, it still continues to be a topic of discussion, and I'm sure we'll continue to discuss it. And while this October's work does continue on from last year's synod, one of the few novelties of this second session are these theological forums, these conferences that are held publicly here in Rome to explain the theological undertones of the synodal process. And as we report, these forums give us a glimpse into the private debates happening among delegates and theological experts at the synod. Let's take a look.
We come before you with reverence.
This year, the Synod on Synodality opened its doors to the public. The novelty of this assembly is that while the 368 members must remain silent during the course of the synod, some of them were able to speak freely about the discussions of the assembly and answer questions from the faithful. The 4 sessions took place on October 9th and 16th. Known as Theological Pastoral Forums, these open meetings allowed for dialogue on what was discussed behind closed doors in the Vatican.
These theological forums are new this year, and in many ways, from what we're hearing, it's because the theological experts and canon lawyers here last year felt like their views were maybe not incorporated enough, or were not factored into enough in what the Synod Assembly was doing. So the theological forums were created as kind of a platform for these different experts to express their views, to try to share what they think is the right way to approach synodality.
On the one hand, they are tempted.
Theologians, experts in canon law, and bishops participated in each forum. Its members focused on topics such as the people of God as a subject of mission, the authority of the bishop, the relationship between the local and universal church, and the exercise of primacy.
The participation of theologians and canonists, these experts in the Synod on Synodality, is very important because in many cases, these experts started writing and thinking and talking about synodality well before it was really on the global stage, or really that we are aware of it on this level that we are now. And so in a lot of ways, they are setting the agenda. They have set the agenda. They were contributing to the writing of the working document, the Instrumentum Laboris, for the Synod. So their participation is really fundamental in driving the direction of the Synod on Synodality.
The meetings presented an opportunity for speakers to propose changes to canon law, among them to involve the laity in the decision-making process in the Catholic Church.
What's being discussed is really how the rest of the people of God, laity included, are involved in the bishop's work. So, for instance, on the question of governance, there's an emphasis on listening, on consultation with laity. Some people say that should be more required, it should be obligatory, and some people in these forums have even gone as far as to say that groups made up of both bishops and laity should have decision-making power in the church, which would definitely be a novelty and a big change.
Within the theme on the mission of the Church, some speakers also stress that it is essentially evangelization and consists of the proclamation of the kingdom of God, but insisted that this mission is lived differently for each member of the Church and is a personal task.
And joining us now is Bishop Kevin Rhoades. He's the Bishop of Fort Wayne, South Bend in Indiana, and a U.S. delegate here at the Synod of Bishops. Bishop, thank you so much for taking the time to join us. And what I know is a busy day and a busy week. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. Great to be with you.
And so you've been here throughout October. You were here, obviously, last October as well. Bring us up to speed about what it's been like these past 3 weeks and how it's compared to last year's.
Well, it's been easier because having the experience of last year, I kind of knew the whole style of the Synod and how to do the working groups and interventions. So in that sense, it was easier. Yeah. You know, I knew a number of the delegates from last year, so it was nice to reconnect because you make some friendships. Some of the bishops and other delegates I got to know from around the world. Wonderful to get together with them again. And then this year, I think, you know, we've certainly made a lot of progress. And we're now this week reviewing the draft of the final document, which is not as rushed as last year. I don't know if you remember last year, it was really exhausting. Right. I don't feel as exhausted. I mean, it's been a little tiring, but to be honest, I don't feel like worn out.
Okay.
Yeah, this particular synod has been mandated by Pope Francis to focus on synodality. Some of the hot-button issues have been removed and given over to the study groups. How has this focus been this time compared to last year? And sort of anticipate a little bit of what you think the final report might end up saying.
Yeah. I've appreciated narrowing the focus of the Synod because there were so many different issues. As you mentioned, the Holy Father established these 10 study groups. So now we've been able to focus more on the theme of synodality, which was the original intention. And I found that there's certainly been growth through the couple of years that we've been working on this, where there's more clarity now. I think some of the theological aspects have been ironed out. I think the idea of a synodal style of the church is attractive. I think about even my own ministry as bishop. I would say, yeah, I try to have a synodal style of leadership. I'm always listening and consulting the faithful because I know, and obviously praying in the whole decision-making, discernment. So that's what this is all about, really, to have this style of governance and decision-making in the church. And then there are the structures of synodality that we already have. The diocesan and parish pastoral councils, diocesan finance council, the presbyteral council. So in a way, it's about really taking seriously these councils, these synodal structures and processes that we have. I'm not a fan of like increasing structures and processes because I'm not a bureaucratic guy. I like being out preaching the gospel and being in the parishes. So I'm not of the mind that we need a lot more structures and processes. I think what we do need, though, is using the ones that we have that are already there in the Code of Canon Law more effectively.
You said you've appreciated the greater focus this year on the working document. For example, we shared with our viewers how Cardinal Victor Manuel Fernandez yesterday reaffirmed Pope Francis's position against women's access to the diaconate. There's a lot of chatter about the role of women in the church, but Bishop, how do you already see women in your diocese leading in the church?
That's a great question. I don't know what I'd do without the women who serve in the church, including in positions of leadership in the diocese. That may be not common around the world, but certainly in the United States. If I look at, for example, at the diocesan offices that we have, several of them are led by women. They're part of my bishop's cabinet, which is kind of like the heads of the various departments that we meet regularly. So I do think that there's a place and role and importance of women, a gift of women already that we have being serving the church in roles of leadership. And I think that's where we're headed in a sense that it's not about the sacrament of holy orders, that women have a very wonderful role apart from the sacrament of holy orders. With their particular gifts in many different areas, whether it's Catholic education, Catholic healthcare, communications, and pastoral, even in pastoral life and pastoral care. For example, I have a woman in our diocese, leadership position, who kind of heads up a lot of our pastoral care of people, whether it be people who are suffering because of mental illness or other issues, those who've been victims of sexual abuse. So women have a really important part of our own diocesan life.
Yeah, talking again about structures, at these theological forums that have been held over the last weeks, they were looking quite a bit at church structures, authority, and there have been, I know, proposals put forward to change canon law to expand the authority or scope of episcopal conferences, perhaps even to be able to look at matters of doctrine. Can you talk about that? As a church, can we do that? Can we expand the power of episcopal conferences? But also the question of what the implications of that could be.
Right. Well, of course, the papacy and the episcopacy are by divine institution. Episcopal conferences are not by divine institution. So I think we have to keep that in mind.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of pushback, a lot of interventions about when the issue of the teaching authority of Episcopal conferences came up. And I think the main point that many of us wanted to make was that, yes, bishops can teach through the conference, but it always has to be in communion with the teachings of the Universal Church. For example, I was the chair of the Committee on Doctrine of the USCCB, and now I'm still a member.
Yeah.
So if we were going to issue something that has to do with the Catholic faith, the doctrine, we don't just do that on our own. We would consult with the Vatican and make sure we're on the same page. Otherwise, you can lose the unity of the Universal Church. So there needs to be that a check on the doctrinal authority of an Episcopal conference. It's always teaching in communion with the Bishop of Rome and with the Episcopal College throughout the world. We can't have different doctrines of faith or morals in different countries. That just would destroy the unity of the church.
That's Episcopal conferences, whereas bishops are successors to the apostles. So practically speaking, locally speaking, what does that authority look like in your own diocese?
Yeah. Well, actually, I always keep that in mind. The apostles, and of course, the apostles have their weaknesses, and we bishops have our weaknesses. But we've received a special charism for teaching, for leading, shepherding, and to be the high priest, really, of the diocese in the image of Christ. And it's an awesome vocation, but it's very humbling. And I think one of the things that with the Synod is seeing the proper role of the bishop in because of receiving the fullness of the sacrament of holy orders, but he's not alone. I mean, we have our co-workers, the priests, we have the deacons, plus we have the lay faithful who we need to listen to. A good shepherd knows the sheep and also listens to their needs. And there's no way that we can lead the church well unless we know the faithful and also listen to them. And I received so many insights by consulting the faithful.
I'm sure.
So that's what synodality is about.
Well, you're a listening bishop. I know that you listen to the faithful, you listen to your flock. What are they saying? What were they saying coming here? And what's the message you're bringing home to them?
Yeah, no, the people of my diocese were very, those who participated in the synodal consultations, etc., were very grateful to have an opportunity to gather and to share their thoughts, their needs, their ideas about evangelization and how the church moves forward. So I think they appreciated that opportunity to be listened to. Yeah. And I think that they were just hopeful that the synod they weren't not looking for fundamental changes. I mean, there were some people who wanted ordination of women, but really that was not principle. It wasn't the majority by any means. They weren't looking for major changes in church teaching. I mean, most of the people are happy being Catholic. They believe in what we teach. They weren't looking for major changes. But they did like the idea that of being a more participatory church, where they can participate more in decision making and in pastoral planning, and that their voices be heard. And I think I can go back and say I think that's going to be the result of the synod.
In our remaining minute with you, Your Excellency, I think a synod, there's a possibility it could become insular and self-referential. How does the Church guard against that and ensure that we are guided by the Holy Spirit?
Well, I'm glad you said that, because remember, it's how to be a synodal missionary church. The synodal part, that's not the end. I mean, it's a means. Yeah. The end is mission. It's bringing the gospel, the truth and beauty of the gospel, the message of salvation in Christ to the world. That's our mission. Synodality is not the end. It's a means towards that end. So I think going forth, making disciples, that's really going to be the test. I mean, it's kind of following on what John Paul II called the new evangelization. I think this is part of that.
Yeah. We'll continue to look for that fruit, and we're grateful for your mission. Bishop Rhoades, thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me. God bless you.
Thank you so much. And our coverage from Rome continues right after this break.
The Mass in B minor, composed by Johann Sebastian Bach, is considered one of the most iconic musical compositions in all of music history. I'm Jacqueline Larry Warsaw, host of EWTN's In Concert series. Join us as we bring you Bach's Mass in B minor, performed in Amsterdam at the famed Concertgebouw Performance Hall. Philippe Herreweghe will conduct the Royal Concertgebouw Orchestra and the Collegium Vocale Gent. That's Bach's Mass in B minor, next time on In Concert, here on EWTN.
And Simeon blessed them, and said to Mary his mother, Behold, this child is set for the fall and rising of many in Israel, and for a sign that is spoken against. And a sword will pierce through your own soul too, that thoughts out of many hearts may be revealed. Luke chapter 2, verses 33 through 35.
Election night is just around the corner, and EWTN News is here to help you get ready to vote. With so much at stake, life, our families, and religious freedom, we're committed to keeping you informed on where the candidates stand. Join us Tuesday, November 5th for an election night special with extended coverage and expert analysis on the issues that matter to you. Tune in at 6 p.m. Eastern, again at 9, and the next morning at 10 for full results, only on EWTN.
I'm Tracy Sable. Tonight on EWTN News Nightly, the Vatican renews its agreement with China regarding the naming of bishops in the communist country. Plus, former President Trump and Vice President Harris hit the campaign trail as Democrats make a last-second push for pro-life votes. Join us for news from a Catholic perspective.
We are joined now by AC Wimmer, the founding editor-in-chief of CNA Deutsch. Thank you so much for being here, AC, and thank you so much for all the work you've poured into coverage of the Synod on Synodality and the live updates happening at CatholicNewsAgency.com. There was an announcement today, breaking news. The Vatican and Beijing announced they have renewed their power-sharing agreement on the appointment of bishops in China. This does have some news related to the Synod as well, but can you first break down this major announcement?
Sure. Thanks, Catherine. Thank you, Father. It's great to be here. Well, the Synod couldn't be more exciting if you wanted it to be. Given this announcement, it was expected for this week because it expired roughly around this time now. What's new is that it's been extended. So this is going to be a longer period, 4 years, we're told, instead of 2. Mm-hmm. You know, it was first signed in 2018, and it keeps being extended. We still don't know what's actually in there. We know it is about bishop appointments, but the actual wording remains confidential.
Okay.
And so that makes it even more interesting in a way that now we've got this ongoing process, it seems.
And it ties in to an article you wrote just days ago for Catholic News Agency about how two prominent Catholics, Cardinal Joseph Zen of Hong Kong and American author George Weigel, have leveled sharp criticisms at the Synod on Synodality with a focus on the Vatican's approach to China. Let's start with Cardinal Zen. What were his main concerns?
Indeed. Cardinal Zen's a seminal figure, of course, in the Church, and speaking as a Chinese prelate, as the former Bishop of Hong Kong, he voices concerns, however, that are universal. So he's got a number of concerns about the Synod, in particular with a view to legitimacy. Are there still bishops talking, walking together, synhodos, as he explains in his blog post, and making decisions as a Synod when there are lay participants? So that is the first question he's raising.
Okay.
He's also been very critical of how the Vatican has interacted with China and, this confidential agreement. I think for our viewers, it might be helpful to just briefly note the differences. There is an underground church, there is a patriotic church, and what all of this means and what that means for Catholics living on the street, living in China.
Absolutely. So that's the neuralgic question, Father. You're hitting the nail on the head, if you pardon the expression. The situation for the underground Catholics in China has always been one of persecution, and that, unfortunately, we're told, continues to this day. The change in politics that we're seeing in diplomacy since this 2018 agreement, the Sino-Vatican Pact, if you like, is that the official Chinese Patriotic Church, which more or less is under direct control of the Chinese Communist Party, is recognized, and therefore bishops are recognized. There are 2 bishops at the Synod as we speak. One of them has formally been excommunicated for this reason. He's now recognized as a delegate. So, comparing this to previous ways that St. John Paul II, Pope Benedict XVI handled the matter, understanding, supporting, not just praying, as Pope Benedict called us on to do, but also helping the persecuted Catholics, we've seen a change of tack, if you like. Interestingly, George Weigel points out that this is something that's been tried in the past, especially with communist systems in the 20th century, with the so-called Ostpolitik, the politics dealing with Eastern nations. It's a kind of appeasement or rapprochement politics. It was kind of quietly buried, George Weigel writes, under St. John Paul II, who with his Polish experience defeated communism, of course, or helped defeat it, and therefore went in a way that was only recently now changed. So that's a very dynamic and also perhaps dramatic development.
And how significant, the fact that there are these public criticisms from Cardinal Zen and George Weigel, how significant and consequential is it?
Well, it depends on whom you ask. And I think you asked the right question, Father. The Chinese Catholics on the ground, if you like, in mainland China, we still have a huge number of 10 bishops that are being persecuted. From what we know, the Hudson Institute published recently an article on that. You can read all about it on CNA. Courtney Morris just covered it for us. And you've still got the situation that Christians are being monitored, manipulated, forced to register if they don't completely comply with what the official Chinese Patriotic Catholic Church is demanding. But on the other hand, of course, you have those saying, well, we're in communion, we're creating communion. And even the Vatican News editorial director recently wrote about this, saying, this is the kind of debate we're having in the Synod now. We're kind of demonstrating unity, and we're working towards that. Now, the burning question around this, of course, is the concept of synicization, which I think is worth briefly talking about. Is it enculturation, in other words, adapting to local situations like we always have as Catholics over many, 2,000 years? Or is it something more? Is synicization, as it is promoted and promulgated by Xi Jinping, the president of China, as an act of turning Catholic and other things Chinese to a degree that they even comply and comport with communist atheist ideology? And that is a debate that is actively being fought out. And I think that is perhaps the most important point, that this debate is affecting lives, it is affecting Catholic life in China. It is, and this is one of George Weigel's crucial criticisms, I would argue, it is arguably affecting the Synod. Perhaps somewhat polemically, he says the Synod is at risk of synicization itself, and that is a key concern.
I know that you studied Chinese. You engaged in Chinese studies for your degree at the University of Melbourne, so you're really an expert on this. I've heard it said, that precisely because a lot of those in the service industry in China are coming from the Philippines, and other Far East, oceanic countries. It has been suggested that by the mid-2030s, it's quite possible that the Catholic population of China could be very large and very great. And I wonder if what we're seeing here with the communist regime is, in fact, a worry that it's going to be too Catholic, that China's going to become too Catholic.
Well, if you allow me, I couldn't agree more. I think, for what it's worth, when you look at the way that China, the Communist Party, is dealing with religion overall, you can see a similar thing happening in Xinjiang and in the West with Islam, and the way that the Uyghurs are treated. You can see it in the way that the sect or group of Falun Gong has been treated. And you can see it in the overarching concern. If you look at what socialist propaganda or ideology promotes as social unity, it is, of course, an atheist ideology that falls under the party control. So migration, but even just, missionary work, evangelizing, spreading the gospel, which we're called to do. When we leave Mass, we're called to spread the good word, becomes problematic. So absolutely, it is something that pertains to all religions, but arguably more so even to us, to Christians, to Catholics. And given our history, look at the great saints that we've had in China, Matthew Bunson and others, and how they tried to deal with it. This is a negotiation that's been going on for a very long time, and China has a long history. They might not remember everything when they wanted to, but they certainly are aware of it.
Did you have a follow-up, Father?
Yeah, well, I know that in different areas of China, the lived experience is very different. We had 2 Chinese Dominicans living with us at the Dominican House of Studies until this year who were studying at the Catholic University of America, grew up in very different parts of China and had 2 very different experiences. In a more rural area, church was more accepted. People were open about it. In the urban areas, as you know, it's just really clamped down. But it does seem, and I had a friend that actually visited China a few summers ago, like with the old one-child policy, that even in some of these rural areas, when you have so many Catholics who have become Catholic, people who have become Catholic, you have whole villages and whole neighborhoods, that there's even a sort of underground network of figuring out how to have more children. And to be raised by couples who don't have children, but it's like an open secret in the village is some of the stuff I know that Catholics are engaged in China.
Well, I'm glad you're sharing that experience and spilling the beans that way, because I think it's a really important witness in a way that you're seeing on the ground. And as you mentioned, it's incredibly diverse. China is huge. Local governors and cadres and functionaries commissars have incredible authority and power, and the clampdown on the church is selective. And it is easy to refute some of the more, general assertions when you look at the reality on the ground. And I would argue that it does us well to recognize what's going on the ground in individual cases, to pray for them, perhaps even support them where it makes sense. And sometimes that can be done with tacit or open agreement of officials. There is room to speak. And perhaps that is where we come to a sort of, positive conclusion for everyone, and that is kind of emphasized on the Vatican side. Of course, there's hope for dialogue and engagement.
Well, to that very point, here we are in Rome at the Synod on Synodality, where representatives from around the globe are here together. Are those persecuted Catholics and Christians, that reality on the ground that we're discussing here, are their voices being heard here? And can you speak to that aspect of the Synod, of the global church coming together and fruit that can bring?
Yes. Well, certainly, that's not to sound, sort of facetious. Ex negativo, they are being heard, of course. You might have official lines, but we also have this reality of the truth that, as St. Augustine teaches us, we just need to set it free. We don't need to be afraid or defensive about it. And that is kind of what you can see with the example that you were using in regards to your question. I think to your point, what we're seeing with regards to persecuted Christians, especially in China or elsewhere, is the reality of what they're experiencing is nonetheless boiling up to the surface, hopefully also through the work that we're doing, reporting on things, but also in the way that it is being negotiated. I'd like to think, I haven't seen the agreement, of course, in the way that this agreement is looked at, and then how the Vatican tries to engage. Let's be fair, this is, of course, the point that Cardinal Pietro Parolin, the Secretary of State, makes when he says enculturation is what syncretization is if we do it the right way. That's kind of the do ut des, I give so that you may give, sort of principle behind that we as Catholics can perhaps agree with. It may be rapprochement to a degree that St. John Paul II would not agree with, let's be honest, but it is certainly the kind of positive side of it. I'd like to think, though, we need to be able to hear from the ground what's really happening. Not only individual cases, we've been reporting on this for many years, of course, we've got great people doing that, I'd like to think, but also how these can then be accommodated. This agreement's now quite a few years old. It was meant to be ad interim. Perhaps the Synod would be an opportunity to look at, now that it is engaged and extended for a longer period, of also seeing what are actually the demands on the Vatican on the Catholic side, and how can we bring those into the discussion?
Well, with our final minute with you, AC, again, you were here last year at the Synod. You're here this October as well. How do the two compare?
That's a great question. I'd like to think on the one hand, we've got these old Groundhog Day experiences. We're trying to work out who's at the press conference today, what are the discussions, what's being said behind the scenes. But on the other hand, everything is different because we're approaching the final document, Catherine. Can I be honest? We're actually pretty excited about it because it's been such a long time coming.
Yeah.
So we've been praying for it, we're working for it, and now we're hoping to cover it well.
Absolutely. Well, you're helping us do that. AC Wimmer, thank you so much.
Likewise, thank you. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. We'll continue our coverage right after this break.
Keep Christ and Christmas this year with holy reminders for those on your gift list. From seasonal ornaments and items for your home to a wide selection of gift-giving ideas. Let EWTN Religious Catalog inspire your Christmas shopping. Log on to our website or call toll-free at 1-800-854-6316. Buy Catholic. Shop today at EWTNRC.com.
America stands at a tipping point in the ongoing battle to protect the dignity of all human life. Whether on television, radio, print, or online, EWTN News brings insight and analysis from a Catholic perspective on the important issues that will affect you in 2024 and beyond. EWTN News Election 2024. Discover, discern, engage. Go to EWTNnews.com/election.
Men's Spirituality takes center stage every weeknight at 11:30 p.m. Eastern. Mondays, Chris Stefanik introduces you to ordinary people living extraordinary faith on Real Life Catholic. Tuesdays, Father James Mallon explores health for the mind, body, and soul in Cross Training. Former NFL great Danny Abramowitz and his Catholic coaching staff get souls ready for the big game every Wednesday on Crossing the Goal. Thursdays, tackle the universal challenges fathers and families face today on Fathers for Good. Every Friday, meet Catholic sports legends who put Jesus Christ first in fields and faith. Whether a husband, father, son, worker, or leader, God is calling all men to step out in faith and play on His team. Weeknights at 11:30 p.m. Eastern here on EWTN.
Welcome back to our ongoing coverage of the Synod on Synodality here in Rome. I'm joined once again by both of my co-hosts, Dr. Matthew Bunson and Father Thomas Petri. I would be remiss to not mention that here we are at the Synod on the Feast of St. John Paul II. And Father, I know he has a particular special place in your life.
Well, you know, I wrote my doctoral dissertation on St. John Paul II's Theology of the Body. It's been published by the Catholic University of America Press. So I feel like I got to know him very well over the 4 years that I was, 3.5, 4 years that I was writing my dissertation. And just last month, I was in Krakow, first time I have visited Krakow. And I had the wonderful experience of being able to go to the Archbishop's residence, which is now diocesan offices, but this is the residence where Cardinal Sapieha ran his underground seminary during the Nazi occupation. And this is also the chapel where Karol Wojtyła was ordained a priest, and so I was able to celebrate Mass in that chapel. And then the very next day, I was able to go to Wawel Cathedral down into the chapel of St. Leonard, and that is the altar where the young Father Karol Wojtyła celebrated his first Mass. An amazing figure who, to say he was historic is an understatement. You know, I mean, the 20th century was the most horrible century in human history, and God gave the world, gave the church the saint they needed. You know, Bishop Rhoades and AC were both talking about the confidence of that the truth and the faith can give, and John Paul lived that, and we saw that in all of his travels, but especially that first trip to Poland in June of 1979.
Yeah, they often say that to lose interest in a subject, write a dissertation on it.
Yes.
And something tells me, though, that the more that you study John Paul II, the more you began to appreciate him and his legacy of clarity and moral teaching.
Absolutely. And, you know, to the consternation of some theologians and clerics who are no doubt represented at this synod, it is John Paul's interpretation that guides our understanding of the Second Vatican Council, right? So we are not conciliarist. We are papist. So when you have an ecumenical council, whether it's the Council of Trent or the Second Vatican Council, it is the popes who interpret that. St. Pius V, the Council of Trent, and St. John Paul II, his, 27-year pontificate, in which encyclical after encyclical identified the salient theological and moral issues of the church at the time and gave us clarified teaching.
Yeah, I mean, Veritatis Splendor, Evangelium Vitae, but I always go back also to Redemptor Hominis, his first encyclical, where he had that powerful line that a man is a mystery to himself unless he understands himself through Christ.
That's right. This was a favored line of Pope St. John Paul II. And it comes from Gaudium et Spes, the Second Vatican Council's constitution on the church in the modern world. And in that constitution, which Bishop Karol Wojtyła no doubt had a hand in drafting, the line is that Christ reveals to us not only who God is, but who man is. And that Christ is the answer to the question of every human life. And this is the motto, really, of John Paul's pontificate, that Christ is, and knowing him is the only way that the human person is fulfilled and the only way that there can be peace among countries.
And what a privilege to be here in Rome, to go visit his tomb, ask for his intercession for our church, for the Synod. And speaking of St. Peter's Basilica, there are these portraits of these newly canonized saints here. Matthew, bring us up to speed with what happened this Sunday.
So just this last Sunday, Pope Francis canonized 14 new saints for the church, 11 martyrs of Damascus, and then what are called 3 founders, 2 women religious and 1 priest, Giuseppe Alamano, who's the founder of the Consolata missionaries. And then you also had Elena Guerra, who was herself a remarkable foundress and also a teacher at one point of Gemma Galgani. And you had Marie-Léonie Paradis, who's based in Quebec, whose own charism was to establish teachers and those who could help the church and those who were most in need. But we also focus on the martyrs of Damascus. 8 Franciscans and then 3 Maronite brothers, the Musabki brothers, who were executed, massacred under horrendous circumstances for refusing to convert from the Christian faith to Islam by Druze militia in 1860. At a time, we don't remember, or we forget sometimes, just how bad the persecutions have been, not just today, but in the centuries, over the centuries, against Christians.
And it's remarkable that we have these Maronite canonizations. You know, I don't think a lot of people realize, certainly not a lot of Latin Catholics, that there are in fact 24 different Catholic churches that are in union with the Pope. And those churches all, other than the Latin Church, all but one of them have an Orthodox counterpart, but the Maronites do not. There's no such thing. So there's a Coptic Catholic and Coptic Orthodox, Byzantine Catholic, Byzantine Orthodox, Greek Catholic, Greek Orthodox, but there is no Maronite Orthodox Church. And the fascinating story about that is because they were living and they were rather secluded, they never knew that 1054, this great schism of the East and the West, actually happened. And they were rediscovered by the West by the Crusaders, who asked them, "Are you in union with the Holy Father?" And their response was, "Isn't everybody in union with the Holy?" And actually, there's a few things you've missed over the last 500 years, 400 years.
To see the diversity of the church on full display with these new saints, and their witness is truly edifying. Was it intentional to have this happen, these canonizations happen amid the Synod?
Well, we've seen over the years that canonizations have been a facet an event in the middle of synods. I can remember vividly being here for the canonization of John Henry Newman, of Pope Paul VI, in the midst of synods. So in a way, it's a statement of two things. The first is the holiness to which we are all called to be saints, and we can then hold them up as role models. But while a synod is deliberating some of the most important questions facing the church, we also can understand that the saints are there as our guides, and also the universality of the church. We've had saints, for example, in this last batch from Lebanon, as we were talking about, from Canada, from Italy. And that tells us that the synod, like this one, and particularly focusing as it does on the diversity of the church around the world, but that universality and how everything has to be in union. We heard that from Bishop Rhoades earlier. We have to be in communion with the Pope. We have to be a church that is unified.
And on mission as well, Father.
You know, the martyrs are always made martyrs, and the phrase we use is because of odium fidei, hatred of the faith. And it's an interesting pattern that we've seen going all the way back to ancient Rome. Let some authority, in this case it was some Islam, rulers, Islamic people, who believe that by killing Christians, they can somehow suppress the church. But in God's providence, it's just the reverse, right? The church is watered by the blood of the martyrs. The church flourishes because of the blood of the martyrs.
As it has ever been.
And that's a fascinating thing about God's providence, that even this very horrific, brutal murder and of all of these Christians can be used by God and flipped inside out to actually bring more people to the faith. I mean, Uganda would be another classic example, right? St. Charles Lwanga and his companions. Uganda is arguably the most Catholic country in the African continent right now, and it's because of that martyrdom.
Well, there's a reminder, too, with these saints and martyrs. The martyrs, 1860. The other saints were 1914, 1912 when they died, 1926 when they died. So there is, at least in relative terms of the church, a sense of modernity.
Right.
And that's a reminder, too. As we were talking about John Paul II. He traveled the world to remind people that everyone is called to be a saint, but also saints are for today. And we always have to remember, too, heading into next year with the Jubilee, that the announcement was made that there would be a canonization of Blessed Carlo Acutis, who is a millennial saint. And that, for the whole church, then, is something that can be celebrated. But let's not forget that we have saints among us that they are contemporaries of ours.
And many of them hidden, whom many of us may not know about until...
Pope Francis always refers to the unknown saints.
Exactly. I do want to hit on, in our remaining minutes left, about these theological forums that we reported on in this program, these public forums that are happening here in the evenings, and they're with theologians to look at the undertones, the theological undertones of the synodality. Father, how significant are the presence of these theologians here, especially when it comes to their influence on our Synod of Bishops?
Well, we talked about this a little bit yesterday, that it was the theologians at the Second Vatican Council who really helped and pushed a lot of the bishops to reject the pre-written statements and documents that the Vatican Curia had prepared, expecting the council simply to rubber stamp them. And they were the ones that really pushed people like Joseph Ratzinger and André de Lubac and Hans-Urs von Balthasar, but also people like Karl Rahner. And so there has been historically, certainly since the council, but even before that, I mean, St. Thomas Aquinas was a theologian and at the service of the popes of his day. And so there's always been this relationship of those who study theology as an academic discipline and bishops who, by their charism, are in fact the chief teachers. Bishop Rhoades mentioned this earlier. And so sometimes there's been tension there. Theologians, this also came up during St. John Paul II's pontificate. People started to talk about a magisterium of theologians. Well, there's no such thing, right? The magisterium belongs to the Holy Father and to the successors of the apostles who are in union with him. And so having these theologians present, it does seem, and our reporting has suggested this, that it's the theologians who are pushing a lot of the agenda, a lot of the topics we're talking about. So there clearly are theologians pushing for women's diaconate or for more Episcopal Conference authority, but it's the bishops who have the ultimate teaching role in this matter.
Right, they're pushing on those hot-button issues, but they're also receiving quite a bit of pushback. Bishop Rhoades commented that there was pushback at the Synod. We've been reporting on it too. Jonathan Liedl at the National Catholic Register has interviewed people about that, and he's written extensively on that. So there is this pushback from people who, much like last year when they were trying to inject sort of into the bloodstream of the Synod, some of these ideas that are ultimately toxic for the faith, that there is in that hall. They talk about consensus here. Well, there seemed to be a very clear consensus of what the delegates do not want. And I have the sense that that's going to be reflected in the final document this time as well.
I appreciated that Bishop Rhoades, when you all were speaking to him, mentioned that he's now got a greater sense of what synodality is, that it's a way of governance. And I tend to think that a lot of the bishops in the United States have already been practicing that way for many years, of listening to the laity, as he mentioned. But this might not have been a universal experience throughout the world.
Matthew, in our minute remaining here, we'll be here each day reporting on the happenings of the Synod. What should viewers expect in the immediate coming days?
Yeah, well, I expect that we're going to be hearing more, especially at the press conferences, about the draft report. We know that it was delivered to them. We know that they're debating it. We know that they're going to be introducing amendments. Last year, there were about 1,150 separate modi or amendments to the document. I think there's an expectation that there probably won't be that many this year because of the hyper-focus that they have this time. But you never know. And that could also be like the last hill to die on for some of the theologians and some who come here with an agenda. But I expect that at the end of the day, they still have to find that consensus and a majority opinion for that final vote.
We're expecting a little bit more excitement, even more excitement.
There will be
these
some
coming
excitement
days
coming, yes.
with this final document. Well, gentlemen, thank you both, and great to be here with you in Rome. And that does conclude today's coverage of the Synod on Synodality's Second General Assembly in Rome. Make sure to visit our reporting at CatholicNewsAgency.com for all live updates of the Synod. We'll see you tomorrow. God bless.
A special item on EWTN RC.com this month is the Pray from Your Heart Olive Wood Rosary.